Cinema, the only show that's 3 dimensions away from Terrifier being called Art the Clown. I'm your host, 3D Jake, and today we're looking at Terrifier, released in 2016. Terrifier is written and directed by Damien Leone and stars Jenna Carnell, Samantha Scafidi, and David Howard Thornton. The movie is essentially a independent horror film that's about these women on Halloween night that's being followed around by a clown that they met at a pizza shop. And the clown, who is almost like a mimish, just carries a garbage bag around. And this clown basically has murderous intentions for them, where he tracks them both down and plans to murder them in horrendous ways. The movie Terrifier essentially came from All Hallows Eve, which was an anthology horror film that was independently made also by Damien Leone. And Art the Clown, who was played by another actor at the time, was basically kind of like, like the Crypt Keeper in a way we're introducing these sketches. And so David Howard Thornton plays him in Terrifier. And so Damien Leone thought, oh, this is a really cool idea, clowns and everything. And so we should make it into a whole movie about Art the Clown. And so essentially the producers of that film at the time felt like, no, because clowns are not really in. This is before the It craze. And so essentially Terrifier basically floated away. And so he basically met a guy named Phil DeFalco, and of course got the money and decided to independently make Terrifier, where he wrote and directed. And this time around, he cast a woman named Jenna Carnell and Samantha Scafidi. And he cast, because the other actor had gained weight at the time and everything, he didn't want to play Art the Clown. So basically, he hired David, a new actor. He auditioned a couple, and then, of course, a theater actor named David Howard Thornton auditioned. And then he would go on to play this iconic character named Art the Clown for years to come. The movie, when I first saw this movie, I mean, it was the most talked about movie on Netflix, because it's like when you looked at horror movies on Netflix, it was always that picture of Art the Clown just smiling evilly. And so I had never saw this movie. It wasn't until another YouTuber named Elvis the Alien, who was doing a review of this movie and said how fucked up and crazy this movie was. And so I really didn't even have no knowledge of this movie. I was like, huh. And then my brother, who watched it on Netflix one night, said, oh man, this movie's crazy, and tells me what happened. I'm like, oh, I gotta see this. And then of course, I watched the movie for the first time, and before Terrifier, and then as I started watching it, I was so disgusted and so amazed at the same time. I was like, this is a piece of shit looking movie, but then the kills are great in the movie. And I don't mean that to shit on Damien Leone. I mean, it's shot terribly. Like, it feels like almost like it's a porno, but with no sex. That's how, like, I would say the cinematography is. Most people have said the first movie is terrible. It's like badly shot, but like it's got fucking great kills, and the acting is not bad. It's just mostly where it comes off that most people decide to not like, where they turn them off. It's basically just Art the Clown essentially just murdering people is where that's what the kills are what essentially, just like with Saw. I would say Saw has a better story and kills, but this movie didn't have a great story. I feel like the story is really what kills it, and the cinematography is awful. I feel like, but the directing is not bad. It's not badly directed at all. I would just say it's mostly the cinematography and the story is where it's weak. I feel like if it had a better writer, and that's no offense to Damien Leone. I just feel like it was your first really movie for this character, and I feel like sometimes the first movies are not always the best ones out the gate. I mean, look at Last House on the Left. I don't really think that's a well-made movie at all. In fact, I think the original Wes Craven's Last House on the Left, is not a very good movie. And I think it's poorly shot, and I think it's badly acted in some scenes. And I think, honestly, I would say Terrifier is a better movie compared to Last House on the Left. And I know people might say, that's blasphemy, but like, I just feel it is. Honestly, I think even the remake of that movie is better, because it has a lot of things better, it does better than the original. And just like with Hills Have Eyes. And in this movie, I feel like this movie has that issue I had with those two movies, where it's a poorly shot movie. But at least I will say, compared to those, I will say, well, Hills Have Eyes has better acting than Last House on the Left. But like this movie, I feel like has better acting. I feel like the acting in this movie is better. And I'm not saying this, I hope people don't think I'm just shitting on this movie. I'm not. I'm just saying, I'm being fair and honest with this movie's review. The movie is not very good, okay? Like, I mean, if you go into this movie expecting, like, oh, the first movie's always the best one, I would say, honestly, Terrifier 2 is a much better movie than Terrifier 1. And on every front. And I mean that in the most nice way as possible. Like, it has a better story, it has a better I would say sometimes the acting is questionable to certain actors, not to every actor in that movie. And but then I would say this movie though has one thing that the acting is strong, the kills are great, and this movie was made like it basically was shot like in three locations in this movie, like a pizza shop, like the street, a warehouse, and a morgue. I mean that's really the only thing you could think of really 3 to 4 locations. Um, I do like that just when you think the movie's over, like it gives you another 10 to 15 minutes of the movie. Like where I really like how like the movie like it sets up where you're like, oh, this clown, and the clown like just sees them, and then because they persuaded soothe the clown just follows them around, and then the clown just like he just plans to murder them. Like the clown kills the pizza guy, and you're like, oh, that's the first kill, and then it just goes around, and then of course it kills like this one girl by tying her up and then cutting her like a deer, a freaking deer. Like he really rips her where you see her hoo ha and everything, and then gets a saw and cuts her like a deer. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, this is a horror film. And I'm like, this is so fucked up. And then on top of that, people will say, like, that scene's fucked up. And then there's another scene that's, like, just as fucked up where there's an old woman who's, like, a homeless woman. And basically, she literally is, like, just, like, patting Art the Clown. And then later on, you see Art the Clown wearing her skin, where you see he's wearing her breast and her naked body. He skinned her alive and wearing her naked body, and then just walks around like this. And I'm just like, what the fuck? Like this is crazy. And just when you think like this one girl's gonna be the final girl, he pulls a pistol and shoots her. I mean, just like it's just crazy. It's like, oh my god, like it just pulls out a gun, and I'm just like, wow. Like this is crazy. I mean, and on top of that, like you have certain kill. There's like a janitor in the movie where you just like you would tell me he doesn't hear any of this. That's kind of dumb, But I think that it still works in the movie, and I think that I could see that being a thing. But then I think though what was interesting to me is this movie does something that no other movie has done. It brings a new character into the movie and makes that the character, the final girl. Like I was expecting, like okay, she's gonna be the final girl. And like no, it just flips the table on it. You're expecting like either she's going to die or be the final girl. Nope, she just doesn't like. And then of course you're like, oh, is there no final girl? But instead she is the final girl. But then it becomes like flips it on its page where it's like, okay, he runs her over and then eats her face, and then the cop shows up, then he just kills himself. And then you're like, well, that's kind of dumb, but I guess this is supposed to be an art house film. And then of course just gets resurrected somehow, and then I will say once he kills himself, I feel like that's where the movie should have ended. Instead, you get this like post-credit scene where he comes back, but I understand that's most slashers do that. I mean, Jason does it, Michael does it. I don't blame the creator for doing that. I will say I would not have done the whole talk show bit where it brings the woman's face, although that was a really gnarly face thing where she just attacks the talk show host, and I was just thinking the whole time watching this going, I wonder if the talk show host is also going to be. But then when doesn't she kill the talk show host? Yeah, like, and then I think the talk show host. I was like, man, if she just disfigured the talk show host, then the talk show host could be like a cult of Art the Clown, a cult of Terrifiers, I mean, that was just going through my head. But I mean, I did enjoy as an art house film. I tried to be more lenient on the fact that it's an art house film. This isn't a big $100 million studio movie. This is like something that costs I think like $25,000 to make. And honestly, that is great that they got to make an independent film. And I really appreciate that. And I will say, I think the sequel is a much better movie on every aspect compared to this one. But I do appreciate that this movie could walk so that Terrifier 2 could run. And I really appreciate that aspect. And I'm not saying, Damien, if you see this, I promise I'm not shitting on your movie. I'm just pointing out the flaws in the movie, and critiquing it, And I promise that this movie, I do appreciate this movie. I do appreciate that it literally could walk so Terrifier 2 could run. And I mean, obviously, I'm sure that every filmmaker from James Wan onward, because I remember James Wan said Saw, he doesn't like rewatching Saw because he felt like there's so many mistakes in that movie that he wishes he could have fixed. And honestly, I feel like with Damien Leone, I'm sure if he was directing Terrifier 1 over again, I'm sure he could say, oh, well, there's things I would have done differently completely. Like, I would have done this differently, I would have done that differently. I mean, I'm sure he would have. I mean, because every filmmaker has. Wes Craven, before R.I.P. rest in peace, man. I'm sure he has said over the years that whenever he was doing Hills Have Eyes and Last House Up, he would have done things completely different. You know, I mean, that happens and stuff. And I mean, you know what? I appreciate this movie for what it is, and I'm really happy. But from a critical standpoint, if I had to give this movie a grade alone, judging from like what I've seen in this movie from a critical standpoint, I would give this movie a C. Thank you so much.
What I want you to do now is just remain calm and stay on the line with me until the police arrive.